Now, a Channel 4 investigation has uncovered disturbing allegations of an illegal trade in the personal data of ordinary people by firms of private detectives. The two companies investigated for the Dispatches programme tonight were willing to sell details of individuals' health, state benefit and criminal records, their mobile phone bills and bank accounts. Using Freedom of Information requests, the programme also discovered that there were at least 13 cases per month of unlawful access to medical records reported to the Department of Health. Our Home Affairs correspondent Andy Davies has this.
For a year, Dispatches went undercover, posing as a fake security consultancy whose fictitious clients wanted private investigators to run background checks on members of the public.
I was met by the Director of Crown Intelligence, Stephen Anderson.
With a hidden camera, they tasked this London-based private investigator to get information about a 31-year-old political activist called James Leadbitter.
I could go through his criminal history. I could go through his financial history.
The investigator got access to James Leadbitter's state benefits history, highly confidential. The subject then turned to his national insurance number.
It can be done theoretically, but you're talking, to get a national insurance number itself is about £350.
Your benefits information.
£350, but the investigator got it and sold it.
That is your national insurance number?
That is my national insurance number.
James Leadbitter, who'd volunteered to take part in the Dispatches,
I feel sick.
Was still shocked at just how easy his personal data had been accessed.
But like £350 by my national insurance number? I mean, why don't they just break into my flat and go through my stuff, you know?
The private investigator, who it's also alleged by Dispatches went on to sell them another volunteer's criminal record, denies breaking the law. He wasn't the only investigator accused in the programme of serious breaches of the Data Protection Act. How to curb the excesses of some within the private investigation industry is currently the subject of a parliamentary inquiry, and here at a seminar today there was a great deal of focus on the so-called rogue private investigator element. Horrifying, said one speaker. Toxic, said another. Until one man stood up and said, put aside for a moment the actions of unethical private investigators. What about the conduct of those supposed to protect us against them? In other words, public bodies holding very sensitive information. Bodies like the Department of Work and Pensions, who, it was revealed today, had disciplined as many as 990 staff for data offences over a 10-month period. That's almost 5 a day. The Department of Health, according to this Freedom of Information request, had at least 13 cases each month reported to them of unlawful access to medical records. While the Metropolitan Police revealed that of the 246 allegations of officer data offences made in the last 4 years, including the misuse of the police national computer, 143 were substantiated, with 101 officers suspended. There's no evidence that private investigators were involved. That detail isn't available. But it's well known that some PIs have recruited sources within these organisations in the past.
These are high numbers which are disclosed here, but what is not clear is how many of these are people supplying the information quite illegally outside the organisation, and how many are simply browsing for their own interest. The former is clearly illegal, the latter is highly undesirable, but is more a disciplinary matter. But certainly when I was Commissioner, we had examples from inside Social Security, inside the police force, elsewhere, of people who are either selling the information or passing it on to their family and friends, and we prosecute it because that is unacceptable, it's illegal activity.
If there remain serious vulnerabilities in the systems meant to protect our data, there are some within the private investigation industry only too ready, it seems, to exploit them. Powerful operators in an industry which remains unregulated.
And that Channel 4 Dispatches investigation is on at 8 o'clock, right after this programme. But we're joined now from Birmingham by Beverly Finn, a private investigator herself and chairwoman of the World Association of Professional Investigators, or WAPI. Beverly Finn, we've known for a while, we've been talking for a while about celebrities being targeted by rogue private investigators. But how widespread is this illegal purchase of personal and confidential information about members of the general public?
I don't think it's as widespread as you would probably think. I certainly think that over the past 5 or 6 years, the private investigation industry has sharpened up their act. And I think that the rogue element of the investigation industry is very small. I think you're probably looking at maybe a maximum of 2 or 3%. But I think that you have...
2 or 3% of what, though? I mean, how many private investigators are we talking about?
Well, they say there's something like 10,000 private investigators in the UK, and you've got investigators that advertise openly their services to the general public. You've got agencies that aren't even on the radar, people that work undercover. So I think you have to try and differentiate between the general public who phone up for services and for people that are working within the security industry as well. I mean, what is an investigator?
How urgently do you think the industry needs to be regulated then?
I think, and our association feel, as do the other two associations, feel that the industry does need to be regulated. But I think the demonisation that we're seeing over the past few months with the Levenson inquiry certainly takes away from the fact that you have some very hard-working investigators in the UK that are working between 15 and 20 hours a week to 15, 20 hours a day, actually working as professional investigators and have been for many, many years.
Well,
and to brand everybody, no, I think if you can let me finish, branding everybody with the same tar is not good.
But what would be okay for those hard-working investigators you talk about? I mean, for example, could you plant a device on my car or use some kind of tracking device in my home?
No, you couldn't. I mean, it all depends on the circumstances, and you have to evaluate every single case.
So what's legal and what isn't?
Well, that's a very broad scope, isn't it? We'd have to be here for several hours to discuss what's legal and what's not legal. You have to follow the rules of the UK and the law within the United Kingdom as it stands.
So how much do you blame rogue private investigators for giving the industry a bad reputation? And how much do you think the public agencies who are not looking after this data correctly should be blamed?
I think everybody is to be blamed, but I do think that the investigation industry over the past 5 years has really looked toward the information that they're getting hold of and what they're doing with it.
Beverly Finn, thank you very much for joining us.